don't care what team is on the field. I don't think anybody would be willing to do that. Because the goal after the huddle is to break apart and to execute the play. To execute the play. Well, if you come here regularly, and I'm just going to say, if you come here and you've been coming more than 8 weeks, and you're not serving, then you're paying a huge price to watch a bunch of players huddle on the field. And it's time for you to get in the game. It's time for you to say yes for a change. You know, use those lip muscles, man. Move those lips. Get rid of the no and start saying yes. Get out of the stands and get onto the playing field. And then finally, some of you need to say yes to God. That's right. Some of you need to say yes to God. We're not just doing church in a theater because it's cool or because it's fun, because sometimes it's not fun. And there's probably cooler things we could do. We're here because we believe that the greatest call in the world, in history, is to offer up our lives and to accept Jesus as the forgiver of our sins and the leader of our lives. That's why we're here. And some of you haven't accepted him as the leader of your life. And so you need to say yes to God. And you shouldn't delay that decision any longer. This week I met with a newer Christian, someone who's new to River City and someone who just committed to Christ in April of this year. And she said for the longest time, the thing that was keeping her from committing to Christ was the question of belief. How do I believe? You know, I take a lot of things for granted, I think. And that's one of the things. I just never assumed somebody was like, how do I believe? And so I was going to explain it, and they said, no, a friend of mine explained it, and it helped me. And so I want to share it with you, because maybe if you haven't said yes to God, it's because of this. You don't know how to believe. The friend explained it to her like this. Jesus is at the door of your heart. He's at the door of your heart. And he's knocking, and he wants to be invited in. And that's a choice that he gives you too, whether to let him in or not to let him in. And to believe is to acknowledge the knock at the door. I don't know if any of you are like me. This is kind of embarrassing, but I'll tell you anyway. When people knock on our door, if someone else is home, I just keep doing what I'm doing. Because Barb or the kids will get the door, and I figure, you know, if it's probably for them, and if it's not, I probably don't want to talk to the person. So anyway, that's what I do. But to believe, I'm wrecking my own analogy. To believe is to acknowledge the knock on the door, right? That Jesus is knocking on the door of your heart. And it's to go to the door and to actually open it up and to invite him in. Invite him into your heart. Invite him into your life. And before I lead you in a prayer wherein you can do that, the words of this prayer, if you pray them from your heart, will enable you to invite Jesus in. And if you do that for the first time, then talk to me after the service. I don't care how busy I am, taking stuff down. Tap me on the shoulder, and that's something we're going to celebrate together. But before I do that prayer, I just want to say one last thing. Aren't you glad, River City, that he said yes to you? Aren't you glad that Jesus stepped out for you? That he left heaven, which was his home, by the way, and he came to this earth, into a world filled with pain and sin and suffering for you? Aren't you glad he took risks for you? There's an account in Matthew's Gospel of Jesus being in a wilderness, and he's being tempted. He's in the most vulnerable position of his life in many ways, and he's being tempted by the devil. And the reason that's included in the Bible is because it was a real temptation, and there was a real possibility that Jesus would fall. He didn't, but there was a possibility. And he did that for you. He endured that for you and for me. Aren't you glad that God tried something new, that God tried something completely unconventional for you? No other religion has a story like the Christian story. Every other religion is spelled D-O. Some of you have heard me say this before. Every other religion is spelled D-O, do. Because in order to appease Allah or Vishnu or whoever or whatever, you have to do this and you have to do that in the hopes that somehow you'll do enough and that you'll be good enough and that you'll enter paradise or you'll be blessed or whatever. Only Christianity is spelled D-O-N-E. Done. Because God did for us what we could not do ourselves. No other religion has a God creating human beings in his image And then giving them complete freedom and saying, you know what, if you want, you can reject me, and if you want, you can enter into a meaningful relationship with me. And he gives them a choice, and humans freely choose evil, and they plunge themselves and the human race into sin. And then God says, this is terrible. However, I can do something about this. I will do something about this. I will send my one and only Son, Jesus, to earth. And he will be fully God, but he will also be fully human, and he will live a human's life, but he will live it perfectly. And at the end of that life, he will die on a cross as a substitute for the human race, as a payment for sin, as a payment for the penalty committed against me, the holy, true, only God. And then, if humans, any human, would trust in him, follow him, believe in him, I will no longer look at them as fallen human beings, which they were, but I will look at them as my adopted sons, my adopted daughters, which they are. No other religion has a story like that. Only Christianity is spelt D-O-N-E. Because it teaches that God did what we could not do for ourselves. Do you believe that? Well, if you do, then I'd invite you to pray this prayer with me, and then the band is going to come up and they're going to lead us in a final song. So let's just bow our heads and I'll pray, and you can participate if you feel led.